Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at a column from page number 8 of the Delhi edition. On the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti, The Hindu carries a column that evaluates the life and works of Mahatma Gandhi. In this well written column, the writer evaluates Gandhi as an individual and as a leader, and also analyzes his political legacy and philosophical significance. The writer of the column looks at Gandhi not just as a popular historical figure, but also as a philosophical idea. See, the writer points out that Mahatma Gandhi remains the most widely known political leader of modern India. His stature as a major political figure in the world is confirmed by the fact that Gandhi and his teachings and his philosophies they continue to remain relevant even to this day, and his political legacy and philosophical significance continues to inspire millions of people around the world to fight against all forms of inequality, injustice, and historical wrongs. The writer argues that Gandhi is not merely a historical figure from whom we should draw lessons, but the idea of Gandhi, that is, the continued relevance of Gandhian philosophy, makes Mahatma Gandhi a contemporary figure as well in today's world, where the present generation can draw inspiration from his life, teachings, and philosophies. The writer goes on to state that Gandhi is not just a historical figure and a contemporary figure, but he will also remain a future figure because even future generations can draw inspiration from the ideals and teachings and philosophies of Mahatma Gandhi. What sets Gandhi apart from the rest of the political leaders is that his firm belief and practice of simplicity and honesty, not just in his public life, but also in his personal life. According to the writer, Gandhi was not just a teacher or a philosopher or a leader, he was a practitioner in the first place who practiced and implemented his own philosophies and teachings. His life work offers several significant lessons in political maturity, which unfortunately is missing in our current politicians and political parties. According to the writer, Mahatma Gandhi saw simplicity and honesty as an ethical imperative which has to be followed not just in one's personal life but also in one's political and spiritual life. This teaching of Mahatma Gandhi continues to remain relevant because around the world we see that politics has been completely detached from its ethical imperative. Be it in democracies like India or the US, or be it in failed states such as Afghanistan or Myanmar or Syria, or be it in autocratic countries and dictatorships. In societies around the world, we find that politics has been detached from the ethical imperative, and particularly in the Indian context, our politicians and political parties have prioritized power grab and winning elections over the need to uphold ethical imperatives of politics. So, the current political climate in the world is lacking this political maturity, which was displayed by Mahatma Gandhi, not just in his teachings, but also in practice. Mahatma Gandhi firmly believed that there is no divorce between politics and ethics. And for Gandhi, politics was essentially an ethical mode of conduct. Mahatma Gandhi never pretended to be a teacher of truth, but however, his followers and disciples elevated him to the status of a guru. But despite his elevated status as a teacher, he constantly encouraged people to experiment with truth, both as a philosophical experience and as a learning experience. As a teacher and a philosopher, he promoted experimentation with truth, which involves the re examination and re evaluation of our religions, of our politics, and as well as the self, that is, the individual self. It was through his experiments with truth that Mahatma Gandhi was able to identify his own imperfections and shortcomings, and his real strength laid in the fact that he was not only able to identify some of his imperfections and shortcomings, but he even acknowledged them publicly, which allowed him the opportunity to reevaluate and reform his self, his political belief, and as well as his religious and spiritual beliefs. As someone who constantly experimented with truth, he always criticized those who blindly upheld the infallible authority of religion and traditions. Through his experiments and observations, he closely studied various religions, cultures, and societies and came to the conclusion that no religion is perfect and no society or no tradition is perfect. But it is the ability of a religion and the ability of a society to recognize these shortcomings and imperfections which truly gives it strength. This is what led Gandhi to become a truly pluralist thinker who would develop a deep respect and deep appreciation of different religions and different cultures. He denounced those who violently promoted that their religion, their culture was superior to others. But at the same time, he also strongly criticized the arrogance of modern rationality, which blindly questioned faith, tradition, and religious practices. He particularly targeted the imperialist colonialist mindset, which would undermine the value of religion and traditions in the name of modern rationality. Gandhi's opinion was that such imperialist colonialist mindset was driven by arrogance, that their modern understanding of faith was superior to the traditional understanding of religion and faith. So, by striking such a balance, Gandhi became a true practitioner of empathetic humanism, where he was able to understand and appreciate different religions and cultures, thus making him a pluralist thinker. His focus on empathetic humanism allowed Gandhi to display self respect and the spirit of friendship, through which he could place himself in the shoes of others and thus develop a empathetic humanistic understanding of not just religions and cultures, but also with regard to political and philosophical maturity. It was this pluralism and empathetic humanism of Gandhi which made him a firm believer in dialogue and displaying utmost patience while seeking out the truth. It was this humility of Mahatma Gandhi which allowed Mahatma Gandhi to develop an ethical view of all religions, which eventually put him on the path of truth and non-violence. Later, he would merge his pursuit of truth and practice of non-violence into the idea of Swaraj during India's freedom struggle, because he came to firmly believe that all individuals, irrespective of their religion, race, and culture, had the right to self govern, and no group of people should be dominated or exploited by the others. So, when Mahatma Gandhi championed Swaraj, it was not just about the right to self govern or self rule at the national level, that is, at the political societal level, but it also had a deeper meaning at an individual level. In Gandhian philosophy, Swaraj applies for the nation or the state and as well as for the individual. According to Gandhi, Swaraj was a space for self realization where the individual and the society could together re-evaluate and reform their religion, their spirituality, and more importantly, their politics. It was a space where the ethical merged with the political, which is one of the core underpinning principles of Gandhian philosophy. For Mahatma Gandhi, freedom was not just a political act, but it was more of an ethical enterprise about how you achieve that freedom and what kind of politics you employ in achieving this freedom. So, this applies for Swaraj as a space for self realization, where at an individual level, the individuals are expected to display political maturity, respect different religions and cultures, stand up against humiliation and exploitation, and demand the right to self rule and self govern, all while following the path of truth and non violence. According to Gandhi, the same philosophy should guide a nation or a society to re-evaluate and reform itself by practicing ethical politics and by displaying political maturity, where different people, different religions, and different cultures are equally respected, and where both the society and the individual are on a constant path to seek out truth, so that through dialogue and patience and through display of humility, one can not only identify and acknowledge their imperfections and shortcomings, but also to re-evaluate the established norms and to push the individual self and the society towards reform. It is this human maturity and spiritual capacity displayed by Mahatma Gandhi which truly makes him a great leader and a historical figure, and also a very relevant idea and concept for contemporary times and as well as for the future. Gandhi's specific emphasis on character building and as well as on the need to overcome egotism continues to remain relevant to resolve some of the pressing political and societal issues of today and as well as of the future. Gandhi argued that where there is egotism, we shall find incivility and arrogance. But when egotism is absent, then we shall find a sense of self respect along with civility towards others. And it is this mutual self respect towards each other which leads everyone towards the spirit of friendship. And this value is something that cannot be simply taught in schools and in academics, but it is something an individual and a society should build for itself as a part of its moral character building. When you build a strong character based on morals and values, and when you set aside your ego, that is when you can experiment with the truth and move forward on the path of self realization and will lead the individual and the society towards respecting others. And it is this political maturity that is needed today, as it serves an important lesson to the current discourse of politics in the world. And if we are able to apply the ethical imperative to our politics, just like Gandhi advocated, then we might very well find a solution to most of the political issues that are affecting the world. Now let's look at a couple of articles from page number 8 and page number 10. According to this article, Prime Minister Modi has launched the second phase of the Swachh Bharat Mission urban component and the Amrit scheme. See, 7 years ago in 2014, on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti, the Modi government launched the ambitious Swachh Bharat mission. This mission had two components, the rural component and the urban component. The rural component of the Swachh Bharat mission primarily focused on ending open defecation in order to promote sanitation, hygiene, and cleanliness in the rural areas. Whereas the urban component of the mission, on the other hand, primarily focused on cleaning up the cities by promoting solid waste management. Under this flagship mission of the government, the Prime Minister has claimed that India has successfully achieved the objectives of the Swachh Bharat mission rural component. According to the Prime Minister, India has ended open defecation by aggressively promoting the construction of toilets in the rural areas and by providing them with adequate water supply, and as well as by promoting awareness and behavioral and attitudinal changes amongst the rural population. Then in 2015, the Amrit scheme was launched by the government, which stands for Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation. The focus of the scheme is to establish infrastructure that will ensure adequate, robust sewage networks and as well as clean and safe drinking water supply in the urban areas. So the urban component of the Swachh Bharat mission complements the Amrit scheme because under the Swachh Bharat mission, solid waste management has been promoted in Indian cities, where waste management and sewage management had become a huge challenge due to the unplanned exponential growth of our urban areas. This was degrading the quality of life in the urban cities and was in turn directly contributing to several other socio-economic challenges. Because poor sanitation, poor hygiene, and poor waste management is directly linked to several adverse health outcomes, which in turn affects education, livelihood opportunities, and quality of life. So through these schemes, the government was making a lot of progress. And as stated by the Prime Minister, the government has claimed that through the rural component of the Swachh Bharat mission, open defecation has been brought to an end. And in the urban areas, India is processing around 1 lakh tons of waste every day, along with better sewage management with improved quality of water supply. So to further plug the gaps in these schemes and to make our cities more efficient with regard to solid waste and liquid waste management and to provide for clean and safe drinking water, the Prime Minister has launched the second phase of these initiatives to help Indian cities scientifically manage the solid waste and as well as liquid waste and provide for safe drinking water. So in this context, the Hindu carries an editorial on page number 8 which evaluates the performance of these ambitious schemes of the government. According to the editorial, even though the government has put in a lot of effort to promote and implement these two schemes along with sufficient budget, the final results on the ground are actually very poor and they do not exactly reflect the claims being made by the government. While the government claims to have ended open defecation, it is a ground reality that open defecation still continues to be a menace in the rural areas. Several studies have even shown the prevalence of open defecation in urban slums as well, thereby highlighting the inefficiencies of these schemes, which have excessively focused just on the construction of toilets, but not on the other relevant factors, which are also crucial for ending open defecation. Even though Swachh Bharat Mission and Amrut have led to some improvements with regard to waste management and sewage management, there is still no widespread scientific management of waste in Indian cities. And according to experts, most of our cities and urban areas continue to remain dirty and dysfunctional. Several studies have shown that Indian cities are becoming increasingly unlivable due to these waste management challenges, which are directly reducing the quality of life in the Indian cities. In fact, according to a recent study, cities in Vietnam are performing better than Indian cities, especially when it comes to solid and liquid waste management, considering that India and Vietnam have a comparable per capita income. So, considering this, the government has a tough challenge ahead as it implements the second phase of the Swachh Bharat Mission urban component. For this phase of the scheme, the government has allotted 1.41 lakh crore rupees to essentially turn Indian cities into garbage free cities. Under the second phase, the government is also looking to institutionalize urban grey water and black water management. See, black water is nothing but the waste water that comes from bathrooms and toilets, which contains fecal matter and urine. Even water from kitchens and dishwashers are also considered as black water due to the contamination by pathogens and grease. Whereas grey water is the wastewater that comes from sinks, washing machines, bathtubs, and showers. This is said to contain lower levels of contamination, which makes it much easier to treat and process. So, with regard to wastewater management, wastewater is divided into black water and grey water, and the government of India is looking to institutionalize the scientific method of liquid waste management through the second phase of the Swachh Bharat mission. The editorial praises the government for making substantial financial allocation, but however, it raises questions over the capabilities of the government institutions and the institutional capacity of our governance machinery to achieve these ambitious objectives that have been laid out. See, under the first phase of the Swachh Bharat mission urban component, despite making massive allocations and despite the government allocating tremendous resources, India is currently processing only around 1 lakh tons of solid waste. This is grossly insufficient because the initial target was to process 1.4 lakh tons of solid waste. Now, considering the growth in the Indian economy, we can assume that the volume of solid waste and as well as liquid waste is going to grow exponentially in the coming years. And this muted and half-hearted response from the state institutions is simply insufficient to deal with the massive waste management challenge that lies ahead. Hence, the editorial is calling upon the center to focus on implementing the circular economy model. The circular economy model is becoming globally very popular as it is being promoted by the United Nations, by the World Bank, and even by the European Union. In fact, even India is a part of a few initiatives at the global level that is focusing on implementing the circular economy model. In a circular economy model, waste is not just treated as a waste. Instead, waste is treated as a resource. This infographic depicts the circular economy model, which focuses on the entire life cycle of a product with regard to waste management. See, in making any product, several precious raw materials are used. In a traditional economy, raw materials are used to make a product, which in turn is distributed, sold, consumed, and finally these products are disposed, mostly in an unscientific manner, which results in leakage of possible toxic materials into the environment and as well as in the pollution of our sensitive environment and ecosystems. Most of the waste that is generated is not treated scientifically in a traditional economy, and more importantly, waste management is done in an ad hoc manner. Then the precious raw materials which are part of the product, they are simply disposed of, and hardly any effort is made to recollect them or to recover them, and all the waste that is generated usually ends up in urban landfills, or they are just burnt in incinerators, or they are just disposed of in an unscientific manner. But in a circular economy model, there is utmost focus on sustainable exploitation of materials and its usage. and top priority is allocated for recycling, remanufacturing and refurbishing, reuse and recovery. In a circular economy, these methods are implemented throughout the life cycle of a product, and in the entire supply chain, there is focus on scientific waste management, and throughout, the raw materials are recovered, reused, and they are not only recycled, but there is also focus on remanufacturing and refurbishing. Such a model of economic development is considered to be sustainable and environment friendly, and it is being actively promoted by several global institutions, including the UN, the World Bank, and the European Union. As we discussed, even India is taking part in some of these initiatives. So it's unfortunate that the Indian government has not given priority for implementing the circular economy model under the second phase of the Swachh Bharat mission, which has been recently launched. In a circular economy model, the government could focus on community involvement to ensure that precious waste, which is being treated as a resource, can be recovered throughout the supply chain. And it is this community involvement at the grassroots which could make the entire waste management machinery more efficient and more scientific. In fact, this is what has been prescribed under the waste management rules related to plastic waste and electronic waste, which has been notified by the Ministry of Environment and Forest. But unfortunately, there is poor implementation at the center, at the state level, and more importantly, at the grassroots, that is, with regard to our local bodies. The editorial points out that the Swachh Bharat mission doesn't excessively focus on community involvement, but instead, under the current model, a centralized waste management mechanism is being created where mega contracts are being awarded to big companies to run these waste management facilities. But experiences around the world have shown that centralized waste management is bound to fail and it is going to become inefficient. To truly promote a circular economy model, what we need is a decentralized community led model where the community takes ownership of waste management and resource recovery. And for this, the government will have to create partnerships between the private industries and the households, which happens to be the very source for waste generation. It is at the source where waste segregation has to be achieved, and for this, the households will have to be provided with the right kind of incentives. According to the editorial, such a decentralized community led model, where waste segregation is being done at the source itself through a partnership between the government, private players, and the households, such a decentralized model can be truly scaled up to scientifically process and manage massive quantities of waste, followed by efficient recovery of precious materials. But unfortunately, the second phase of the Swachh Bharat mission doesn't prioritize such community involvement and it doesn't focus on a decentralized model. Instead, it provides for a centralized model where the government will work with big companies to create centralized facilities of waste management. Then, even with regard to sanitation under the Amrut scheme, the community role is not being emphasized enough because it is only with the help of the community that the state governments, urban local bodies, and Panchayat Raj institutions can promote the construction and usage of toilets and provide for clean and safe water supplies. Currently, the Government of India has achieved tremendous progress under the Swachh Bharat mission with regard to construction of toilets and with regard to reducing the menace of open defecation. But the inability of the government to maintain water supply to the toilets, and especially the failure of the states and the local bodies, has prevented India from truly achieving these objectives. The first phase of the Swachh Bharat mission has definitely succeeded in promoting greater awareness and as well as in promoting behavioral and attitudinal changes amongst the community. But however, the scheme in its current structure doesn't make the community the owner for ensuring the success of these sanitation schemes. So in conclusion, the editorial appreciates the initiatives of the government but points out that to truly transform urban India, especially with regard to waste management, sewage management and sanitation, it would require community involvement at the grassroots, which can be truly achieved only with the implementation of a circular economy model. Next, according to this article on page number 11, India and the United States have agreed to establish a Defense Industrial Security Working Group. This joint working group is going to meet periodically in order to align the policies and procedures of the two countries, which would allow the defense industries of the two nations to collaborate closely, especially with regard to cutting edge defense technologies. The establishment of this joint working group represents the growing close defense relations between India and US, and this joint working group on defense industrial security will help in protecting classified information related to the defense industries of the two nations. As defense industries work on sensitive classified technologies, there is a need to protect the secrecy of these projects. And as Indian defense industries are working closely with the US defense industries, they have worked out a protocol and established this joint working group to align their policies and procedures to provide for the protection of this classified information. Next, on page number 1, we have a development related to the judiciary and the topic of police atrocities. As concerns about police atrocities are growing around the country, the Chief Justice of India has supported a proposal to form special panels or standing committees in each state, which could be headed by the Chief Justice of the respective high courts, in order to investigate any complaints received from the public with regard to atrocities being committed by the bureaucracy, especially the police officers. According to the Chief Justice of India, such a special committee headed by the Chief Justice of the High Courts will provide for an independent process to hold the bureaucracy and the police machinery accountable for any possible atrocities that might be committed against the citizens. Now let's look at a couple of mains practice questions. The first question: what makes Gandhi so relevant and meaningful for our world is that his political legacy and his philosophical significance continue to inspire millions of people around the globe to fight against inequality, injustice, and historical wrongs. Comment. The second question: transforming urban India calls for community-based moves towards a circular economy. Discuss. Kindly write your answers to these questions and post your answers on the answer writing portal, for which the link shall be shared in the description box below. So with this, let's conclude our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.